We have to fear is fear itself. Good morning. Same time, same station.
Let's get this show on the road.
Tony's Caravan. It is a highly sophisticated
The world's greatest episode. Presenting the world's greatest episode. Presenting the world's greatest episode.
The world's greatest everything. Yeah. It's everything. You got it. Tony Caravan with you after yesterday's marathon live webcast, TV, as we say. I'm back. It's the following morning. I had a good night. Very good night's sleep. Very good night's sleep. Was glad to see. But what I've got here is this is obscurity beyond obscurity for anyone, I would say, under the age of, I don't know, 50 or 60 at least. And even that age group might not be familiar with the name Sylvania. Okay? Sylvania used to make television sets in the old days. And this box, which is falling apart, little pieces, inside of that is what's called a tube. And this would be a replacement tube. I'm going to put my glasses on because I want to look at this one, actually. It's a little bit dust. Oh, no, it's, if you notice, you look very closely, you see that like oval, dark oval on there. That means this tube burned out or was basically about to be rendered somewhat useless. And you can see on the bottom, you know, where the tube like fit in to a spot in the back of the TV, you know, or also, you know, radios used to use tubes. And as you can see on the box, I better be careful with this, but it says Sylvania electronic tube. The packaging with the lightning bolt and the weird logo. Isn't that neat? Quality, you know, the mark of quality. And I don't know what was on the other side because that seems to have, looks probably like it was the number, but it's been broken off. So a little bit of history. We're going to go a little bit into delve into some different things today. I've got a little time to kill before I do some of my Saturday morning things. So
Good morning.
Good morning to you too. As usual, I'm having a few caffeines, soda pop, diet DP, and I was just going to go over. I'm not going to make this one a real long one. I just wanted to get through a few things. But I'll probably need the glasses. I'm tired of wearing glasses on here because it's like people say I saw you on YouTube, but I didn't even recognize you with your glasses. It's like I don't wear glasses. I just wear them on YouTube because I got all these weird, you know, I guess you'd call them props. But there's a couple of things that I have been speaking about over the past several weeks, not just in the live video casts, but in the, you know, the basic, you know, produced ones that I will get back to doing some of those. I'm just going to give a little hello world out here to the chat room, which is open. But I've talked a couple of times about, and I apologize for the glare. Let's see if we can get it, you know, get this thing on here without glare. I don't know why the glare is coming from so many different angles. There we go. Now, this was a novel idea. This was my first album, and it was called 8-track. 8 tracks. And as you can see on the side, if you look closely, I made the, made that resemble the way an 8-track looked. This is down memory lane type of thing. Way an 8-track looked in an 8-track player in your car. And, and then of course it's just a CD, complete with shrink wrap on it. And I've often said this one wasn't, for some reason, like if you go to Spotify, you'll see this image, and tracks from this, just because this was one of the first ones I put up, and some people had watched it or listened to some tracks. And, this is me. This was when I was first getting into just putting out music. And it's just not it's not my best. Like on here, Everything You Know Is Wrong, which is abbreviated EYKIW. And if you see that on Spotify or Apple or somewhere else, my music's available everywhere, or even on YouTube. That's a good song. And of course, the worst Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa song ever written or sung is on here. Those are the two. And I have a ton of these, and I'd like to even I'd be willing to sell these things for just $1 to people, and they'd be worth it. It's almost like selling a single, because like I said, there's 2 songs on it. So you think like side A, side B, but there's really 8 tracks on it. That's why I call it 8 tracks and, mimic that whole thing. And I later wrote a song called Driving Down the Road with a 6-pack and the 8-track on, which is a good tune. It's like it's like kind of a mellow, and it's a lot different than a lot of my other stuff. You should check that one out, Driving Down the Road with a 6-pack and the 8-track on. But the reason why, it's like if somebody requested this, I'd love to. It's the postage that's like outrageous. I'd have the shipping on the, shipping is so ridiculous. I mean, I could conceivably ship it in an envelope, but then probably the packaging would get cracked, because you can't trust those people at the post office. They just throw things around, throw things in the truck, jam things in people's mailboxes and stuff like that. I mean, I hate to say it, there's good mail carriers out there, nice people. Same with UPS drivers. There's nice ones out there too. But I remember watching a thing about, the process of, of these companies like FedEx, UPS, and the United States Postal Service. And, how they, because now they use barcodes and all these different things so that they can automate the system as much as possible. And so there's things come in and they're on this conveyor belt, and they have these, I think this one may have been a UPS thing or something. So boxes coming down this, chute of some kind, right? Or maybe but there's a belt, moving it along, or maybe it's gravity coming down. I don't know. And then there's some readers that can read a barcode or something. And then if anyone knows an old pinball machine, they've got these things that just if they, in order to basically get this thing to various hubs and destination points, this thing like a pinball machine, if it detects that, okay, this thing goes to Atlanta, it just boom, like a pinball machine flipper, like when you're flipping the ball. Again, this whole video might be targeted at people about things that just no longer exist in this world, or you would have been exposed to them or something. And so like a flipper on a pinball machine, it just belts the box to move it into another chute. And you're thinking, man, if you don't have a lot of bubble wrap in that thing, or if there was something like a Sylvania tube, a sensitive tube with little, or like a light bulb, or something made with plastic, that wasn't perfectly, wrapped right, this thing's going to come cracked. But I'm going to look into it because I still have a bunch of these. And like I say, there's 2 tracks on there that are good. And plus it's a classic, It was my first, it's when I was first getting into this thing. And like I said, I don't recommend, this isn't my best work. There's two songs on there that are good and are up there with some, what I would consider some of my best work. But it's an 8-track, and so 2 from 8, the other 6 are mediocre at best. But at least I did it. I wanted to see if I could produce, and then, because you have to get a CD, you have to master it. So I had to master this. And then and then the design, packaging, the whole 9 yards. This is even shrink wrapped. So it was just the idea. And this is that thing. You can do anything, if you really wanted to. It's just content-wise, it was my first attempt. And I've said this before, but it bears repeating. I don't get that many viewers. I apologize to the handful of people that watch these things, but since most people are probably new viewers, as this thing ends up, in perpetuity somewhere in the YouTube archives, hopefully this stuff stays up. That I lost my train of thought. But I think I was going to try to say that, when you find an artist you like, so say you found that song, Game Over, I played that yesterday. Got a copyright strike for my own music, of course. Or Bigger Than That. That's another one. Those are like what I call my hits. If somebody really wanted to play that, wanted to pick that up and put that on right now on a radio station or into some mix, people would totally accept that and say, that's interesting, that's cool, that's a different sound. And the same with like driving down the road with with the 6-pack and 8-track on, and then and many of my other ones they're just good, and they're contemporary, and I experiment with everything from like the beats, like 125, type of thing that DJs do in the club beats to just traditional, like doom, 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 like the old 50s beat poets, to just rock stuff, and it's all live and it's pure, and it's honest, and it's not perfect. It's not refined. It's not overly produced. It's, it's not overly engineered. People criticize me about that, but it's like this video. It's like, I just turned the camera on. I didn't prepare for this that way. I grabbed a few things I wanted to talk about. But me, I'm drinking my morning caffeine on the air and, wiping off my mustache, that kind of thing. And just clicking, good morning, on some of these tracks on my G5 side computer. But yeah, I'll figure something out, and if there is an interest somewhere down the line, if you want this, because it's a collector's item, really is. It's a classic. And remember that the Hanukkah Christmas, the Christmas Hanukkah song is a seasonal classic, and Everything You Know Is Wrong obviously is my signature thing. I even have the T-shirt available, which I'll have a link in the description box later. It's not in there now, but you could go to rockflux.com. Rockflux. Let's see if I can tilt this thing way up. See where it says Rockflux. And it's interesting, over to the over here, you see that's an old-fashioned radio. Let's see if I could do this without damaging my computer. And that's where I grabbed the tubes from this morning. It's an old damn radio. I don't know what kind of damage I'm going to cause getting this computer back down. There's the UFO from the X-Files poster. I'm literally like tilting my computer. Very primitive. there's so much technology, and that's why I thought it was cool to bring in some of this, like to just go down the old with some of this old things that people just don't know about anymore. And and there's a couple of things like that. Like I say, this is like housekeeping for those few fans that I have, and they really kind of, fan is like not a word, friends, online friends or something, interested parties, curious people, they number in the dozens, or I don't know, maybe more. But I once mentioned in one of my production videos that in other words, I say these things sometimes and people have no idea or no context or what I'm talking about. And I talked about one of my first jobs was when I left college after about a year or two. I took a break because I was offered a job, as a marketing director, and I was like 20 years old, and I took it because they were paying me good money, gave me a company car. I ended up in the Philadelphia, Center City, Philly, like really nice apartment and all that stuff. And what it was I took a tabloid, and you can see it's called Exclusive News, and there used to be a chain, a supermarket chain on the East Coast called A&P. And I guess A&P stood for the Great Atlantic and Pacific Tea Company. So we're talking about going way back to the old days. But when I was young, they were still there. The A&Ps are gone now. That company's long gone. But these individuals had they had an in-store thing that just was like a coupon, just one of those coupon rags, tabloid type things. And what I did is I said, hey, man, instead of it just being this, like, it looked like crap. It was just like, the front page had some coupons on it, and there may be some, maybe a recipe for some old lady or something. I mean, and it just said exclusive news, like it was like a mock newspaper type of thing. And in the middle, A&P, like they had this exclusive deal with A&P. These were in stores, in racks, like kind of like you'd see the tabloid things like the Weekly World News or something like that. But I mean, we had that exclusive thing, and it was all over New Jersey, I think into New York, Pennsylvania, Maryland, the A&P, I think, chain was still active in those areas. And it may have been further, and if someone knows, if it extended further, I'd chime in even later on, leave a comment. But I came along, I was the marketing director, so I said no. And so you see, we got, dealing through publicists and stuff like that. So Suzanne Summers at the time was, promoting something. And so I got the official to made her the cover girl. So in other words, even though this was a promotional piece that I just found laying around and it's torn and stuff because it's ancient. So I changed the cover from something really crappy to like this, Suzanne Summers, who was kind of, popular glamour, actress at the time. And, and you could see there's a line of what the content is. And so I invented like the supermarket tabloid kind of in effect, the idea, and it was nice. And then this little thing here is just my marketing. Zero in on your target audience, with exclusive news. This would have been like the front page of a marketing advertising kit that I would have given out to potential advertisers, that kind of thing. So it's kind of show and tell day. Just thought I'd do this because I've spoken about these things. Today I have to. I'm killing time. I've got to pick up a prescription, and I think the pharmacy doesn't open until 9. It's 8:02 on February 13. It's a Saturday, and the temperature in my area right now is it's saying it's 25 degrees outside. And it's going to be another cloudy, miserable, day. And then I have to go do that thing with that store. Well, anyway, Another thing that I used to talk about, and again, this is for people who watch it, and even if you haven't watched my older videos, if you do watch them, then this will give you, some context to understand. But I used to talk about going to South Jersey, Wildwood. Look at those beauties there. And this is an old Wildwoods, promotional, and you could see, and that's the state of New Jersey, the beaches, there. And in here are all these various hotels that existed. And let me see if I could find some classics. I mean, I've known all these places, but just to give you an idea of what it was like. The Dorsey. Yeah. I want to find one that's like, some of these are classics that actually had check this one out. Look at like how complicated that was. See that one there? Whatever it was called, the Royal. It's like castles, and it's pretty wild. Some of the amenities, hot and cold water in all rooms. Imagine that. Bathing from hotel. American and European plan. Whatever that is. Right? I'm trying to find a place that I may well have stayed. I just grabbed this. I've got a pile of some old things. And I talked about myself going down the shore because the drinking age used to be 18 in New Jersey. And again, and I've touched on this before. I mean, there's a classic motel looking type of place. You see? Yeah. Let's see if we can get that. This ocean air. You don't even see. I mean, it's in some places, and maybe even in the Midwest or something, you see remnants of that. But, it's like the title card to this thing where I show all the stick building. Here's a classic one. The Lincoln. A picture of Abe. Let's see if it get some light on that room. I'm trying to find one that has like a bar or something, showing a bar or a restaurant in it. No, can't seem to find that. Hey, it's live TV. This is from, the Tides. I remember the Tides. Let's have some interior pictures. Let's see. Make sure I've got to look here. The Tides. I mean, this is basically what these places look like. And so you can see in here, dining rooms. Those are metal chairs, poolside. It's not perfect lighting here, but there we go. See the big bed, dining hall. How every room opens from the outdoors. And from a printing standpoint, this is old. This is probably from the 50s or something, late 50s, early 60s. And, it wasn't a photographic process to print these kinds of brochures, In those days, the best you could see, in pictures of a girl was like legs. You had to have nice legs if you were a girl. Legs and the arms, the shoulder, most were sleeveless. Right into the 60s, women wore you still see that whenever they do these TV shows. They have like period pieces from the 60s. The women always have like their sleeveless. That was the thing. You were allowed to show their shoulders and and thighs, but the other stuff, keep as much of the rest of it covered up, one-piece bathing suits. Yeah.
Good morning.
It's another day. And so just to continue with this theme, I'm going to lay some other stuff on you. And I remember, I was lucky enough to drive along Route 66 several times. And, like I said, the reason I'm doing this like old-fashioned way, holding stuff up to the camera, is because I don't have the software. And I don't want to invest in it because I not sure if it would work. It would just like fudge up, the whole system would just be messed up. I just hope YouTube Studio, the people behind this, if the algorithm is listening, which it is, if they would just add a few more things to this, to this setup, to the studio setup, meaning put where you could insert picture, split screen, or picture in picture, something like that. I mean, it would take nothing to do that. And and I know they have APIs out there, which for those non-coders, that show you how it works, and that it's probably open source in some way, shape, or form, because Chrome has many extensions you can get. But I messed with code. My coding days are over. I mean, the only coding thing I do now is because I left Adobe. I did tired of paying Adobe's monthly fees, to use Photoshop and InDesign and Premiere and stuff like that. So I have websites that I still have a few websites that I kind of just do for friends, or I'm maintaining them, and they inevitably might have changed, like one for some pizza shop, and somebody has a grocery store, and a couple of personal things. And it's really a chore. I mean, I've gotten rid of most of my websites. At one time I had like 60 domain names, and I still to this day have a couple of websites, but I don't make any money on them or anything. But so I still know, but I know enough about HTML and HTML5 and JavaScript and, and things like that, that I can, if I really sit down, it comes back to me, and I could like make adjustments on websites. A lot of times what I've been doing is I've just been going in FTP, because I don't no longer have, Claris homepage was my program, which is long. It's like 20 years ago they discontinued. I actually have it on. The reason there's lights coming from this side is, and this is where I'm getting my good morning clips from, and
Let's get this show on the road.
that's all I'm using this for, really. But I have Claris homepage on there, which was Apple's free how to make a free website, creation tool app, whatever you want to call it, and it works on there because I'm using an old system. In fact, let me see what operating system I have on here. About this Mac. I wish I could show you this, but Mac OS X. This is version 10.4.11. It's a dual 2 gigahertz PowerPC G5, and I have 6 gigabytes of SDRAM in there, which is plenty for this machine, and this stuff. I also have Photoshop and InDesign on there, but they were the original box versions that I purchased, and so I keep this machine off, not connected to the internet, so that Adobe can't come in or Apple can't come in and like try to yank something, because that's what they do, or change something so it won't work. It's like, hey, I bought it, man. I own that. I own Photoshop. I bought the box. But the thing is, I can't open anything I made, after that system 10.4, which is like, this is like 10 years ago or longer. I forget when they shifted and they wouldn't allow you to use what they call Classic, the Mac Classic apps, then, you can't open anything post that. In other words, you can't, and so I've got 10,000 files I've created since, because I've been designing stuff for so many people, and and incredible, crazy websites I've done for people, all kinds of stuff, just neat designs. Well, if those files were like PSD files, which is a Photoshop format that has layers, for example, you could open those in like in Apple's preview program, but they just open like they're a JPEG file. You can't access the layers, and that's a crime. And it's all just because they wanted to force this cloud service extortion onto people. It's really kind of crazy. So that's, I mean, that's the theme of this show. It's just old fashioned. It's like again, getting back to that title card of this, which shows the stick buildings. I'll get on to that before I get into this couple of these other things. And then this isn't going to be all that long. But it's like what cracks me up, or it doesn't crack me up, it's disappointing. And actually it's, it's in many ways, it's actually sad and tragic, is that they, especially down, when you have like Tornado Alley or along the coast where hurricanes happen, and forget about all this, they try to say, oh, more hurricanes because of climate or CO2, or cows farting or something like that. It's like nonsense. People just didn't live there years ago, or what about those movies like, Key Largo or something with Humphrey Bogart, the documents that the hurricane was coming in, and people used to, and I talked about this before, old houses used to have storm shutters. That's what shutters are. They were storm shutters because there was everybody down the south in those regions, there were so many storms and they were used to that. You had storm shutters, just like people in the Midwest had, tornado shelters underneath where you went under the ground. I mean, you could go back, I said it before, you could go back to The Wizard of Oz, which was written, I believe, in late 1800s, but the movie came out in the early 1900s, black and white. I think that was the first time they had Technicolor. Then at the second half, when the Munchkin part came in, Yellow Brick Road. But what was that movie all about? A tornado, and they were in Kansas, I don't think we're in Kansas anymore, Toto, right? And so, people talk about, ignorant people who think they know more because they saw a meme or they watched some talking head on some show, and they just parrot this nonsense, and they have no idea that like Tornado Alley existed forever, and we've had heat and cold, in the, we had the Dust Bowl back in the 30s. You talk about drought and hot weather and stuff like that. And the same with California forest fires and stuff. And like I said, a lot of trees, that's how, those, I don't know if it's the pine cones or it's one of those certain seed actually, lightning hitting and causing a forest fire, that's actually necessary in order for that seed to be able to actually germinate or whatever. I mean, that's a reality. That's how a part of nature these things are and how far back they go. And yes, the storms and hurricanes were brutal over the years. It's just that there's people on big cities on coastal areas now, and that and that in Tornado Alley, you've got a lot of people who built mobile homes and different things there and neighborhoods, But the fact is, that's why they call it Tornado Alley, and that's why Florida, and the Gulf Coast states have always had hurricanes, right? And always had shutters on the old houses. The point I'm trying to make is to get back to the title card, for this video, is that it's this massive, amount of 2x4s, building some structure, like probably, I don't know, it could be a series of townhouses or some kind of not office building or some kind of structure. But it's just all these, it's a stick building, I call them. And so what happens when there's, it's like the Mississippi floods periodically, and these people, and there's some people, and then they'll have these tragic stories. When I used to watch TV, I don't watch it anymore. But when I used to watch TV news years and years ago, and they'd have these like tragedy interviews with someone who his house got flooded along the Mississippi. And the person will say, this is the second or third time, I think we're done now. We're going to move, Excuse me. And while I feel for that person, and I really do, losing your property, your possessions, all that sort of thing, I just keep thinking, why the hell did you rebuild along the Mississippi when you've lost your house already 2 times before, and that periodically the Mississippi floods? So if this year the Mississippi floods, guess what the reason would be? Oh, it's CO2. And see, this Greta would say that, this proves climate change. And I'm going, yeah, it's been flooding all along. And who knows what was happening in the days, when the indigenous Native Americans lived there. They were probably more aware of it than, any. Quick aside, a person I know, and it actually was a building I lived in before I moved here. I lived in an apartment building about 45 minutes from here in a borough college town. And there was a creek that went through the backyard, sort of beyond the backyard of this apartment complex. It wasn't a big complex. It only had about, I don't know, maybe 12 units, something like that. I was on the top floor, so I didn't care. But once or twice a year, or at least once a year, but once or twice, the creek, you get one of these torrential downpours, and this had been happening, since the beginning of time. And the creek would overflow, flood the yard, and the way the yard was, the building was, there were stairs, but there was a basement where they had like 2 washers and dryers and some storage areas, storage cages, where people who lived there could store their stuff they didn't need in their apartments. But that was basement, right? And I think there was a unit down there too, one apartment unit. An older couple lived there. Well, of course, the creek floods, the water's up a foot in the yard, and it's pouring in through the back door or through those, how in basements you've got those basement window things, that kind of go down and open. And so the basement gets flooded, and these poor people get their unit gets flooded, and all the storage bins, people have things stored down there, get flooded. And I said, I casually knew the owner or one of the owners of the place. And I said to the guy, I said, look, man, why don't you get, a bunch of cinder blocks, which at the time you could buy cinder blocks for like 88 cents each. All right. I don't know if the price of cinder blocks has gone up, but I still bet they're only $1 or $2, right? Just a regular cheapo cinder block. And and a handful of bags of mortar, right? Which you can get an 80-pound bag of mortar, I'm sure, today for like $20 or less. I bought one last year. I think I only paid, was less than $20 for like an 80-pound bag of mortar. I use it to just patch. I have to constantly like touch up things around my house because it's a 100-year-old house. Hey, a little tip on the side, and I'll get back to this, for somebody who, somebody taught me this. If you mix mortar with water and you mix it to the consistency of paint. Excuse me. And what I do is I also add, you don't have to do this, but for the sake of it, you could find this, there's stuff at a hardware store that that they use when people are trying to put concrete over existing concrete. It helps. It's like a bonding agent, right? And so I'll mix a little bit of this bonding agent in. It's cheap. You could buy it. I have a thing of it in there. I use it. I've been using it for the past couple of years. You just put a few squirts. It comes in liquid form. I think they might have a powder form of it too. But anyway, you just, take like a paint type of can or a bucket. And so pour in some mortar, just run-of-the-mill mortar. Add water and start stirring it till it gets the consistency, not the way of mortar, the consistency of like paint, and pour in a little bit of this bonding agent. All right. And get yourself one of those big old flat brushes. I've been using the same brush because it doesn't matter because you're going to be painting concrete. And so say you have your concrete is like looking ragged. It's got like, little cracks and crevices in it, but nothing really too bad. Well, you just take, go get a paintbrush and your bucket now that you mix this and paint your concrete stairs, paint your concrete sidewalk thing with this. All right. Just paint over top of it, right? With this thing. And it'll look like brand new concrete and it will hold up for the year. The worst enemy to it I found is rock salt. So like this year we've been getting a lot of snow and ice and I'd have to put rock salt on my porch and stuff. But last year was a little bit milder as far as, the caking up of ice. So I didn't put as much rock salt out. Plus I think I wasn't using rock salt. I was using something I bought online, that ice, just like ice melt, which isn't as bad on it. But the point is, you get an 80-pound bag of mortar. I'm talking about using about a couple bucks worth of mortar, some water, and a splash of this bonding agent, making a bucket of this, paint consistency mortar, and just because you're painting just a thin layer over, and you make your house or your stairs or something, backyard patio or something like that, look like it's almost brand new. And like I say, it'll last a year, but you'll have to go over it. It does, it's not like an ultimate fix. A mason taught me that, and it works. That's why I say people don't listen to people and learn. Most people today don't know how to properly even use a hammer. Excuse me. So getting back to this apartment building and these cinder blocks. So it's like, I said to the guy, I said, look, I told him, I'll help you, man. We could do it on a Saturday afternoon. We'll do it. Buy me a few beers afterwards. And, and I said, what we do is we'll get a pile of cinder blocks, get a truck to drop off a bunch of cinder blocks. All in all, might have cost $200 worth of supplies. And I said, what we do is we'll build like a wall along where the apartment is, where that yard is, and a little bit beyond, on both sides. I said, we'll build it like, say, 3 cinder blocks high, because the flood never seemed to be more than a foot or so that would cause this problem. And, a cinder block is, I don't know, 8 inches tall or something like that or whatever. So 3 of them, you'd be dealing with, 24, almost 2 feet, basically, something like that, or close to 2 feet, whatever the measurement is, but definitely above, the foot level, and, which is giving you, you're covering yourself in case there's a really big, flooding of the creek, which probably happens cyclically too. That's what I'm saying. You notice most of this movement with this climate stuff is young people, because they haven't experienced. They think they only know what they've heard somebody say or what they've experienced in their short life. And these older people, and shame on these older people that have gone through life and know that things cyclically happen. You know, like that announcer I talked about the other day about in New York about this snowstorm is caused, this nor'easter is caused by the oceans warming up because of climate change. And I'm like, hey man, when I was a kid, snow was like, so, you know, nor'easters, forget it, you know, and they measured snow in feet. And what, the oceans were warmed up back then, you know, in the late 70s. I was a kid. I mean, we have old home movies when I was a baby my parents took, and you know, there was like snow, and it was like the background, it was like we were playing in snow, and it was like ridiculous amounts of snow. You know, so shame on these older people that know better, that have seen it and know it exists and lie. And then these young people that just take the word of anybody. Don't even take my word for it. Just do, you know, you go look at, you know, historical pictures, photos, and that's what I'm about to do. But anyway, so all we had to do was take, you know, all you do with mortar is you mix mortar thicker. You mix it to like the consistency of peanut butter. In this case, get one of those 5-gallon buckets, or the best way whenever you're doing concrete or mortar work is to get like a metal wheelbarrow. And, you know, you dump the bag in there, and you start adding water, and have some kind of shovel or a hoe or something like that you can move that stuff around and mix it till it gets to that consistency of, say, like a peanut buttery type of thing, you know. And you just lay down, you know, level the ground where you are. You could put some gravel or something like that down, you know, or whatever, you know, or you could even embed. You know, what I would do, you know, personally, is I would dig down the ground like about a couple inches. I'd put some fine gravel down there, you know, and then I'd make sure it's level, right? And then I'd probably put, you know, and put some mortar down there as well. But anyway, I put those cinder blocks down, so water coming in, right? And you just like slap this stuff on the top of the cinder blocks and put one, you know, and you offset the cinder blocks, whatever. And what I do is you get the cinder blocks that have, you know, space between them. You don't want to they're the cheaper ones anyway. And then you just shove in between there. Some people will take, will fill them with like concrete, you know, and use rebar and stuff like that. But what I found in situations like that is I just get a bunch of rocks and make sure that the space where here's a cinder block and then there's a cinder block on top of it. Where if this is the top of the first cinder block and the other one's on top of here, of course you put your mortar mix along there and set the next cinder block on top of it. Okay. And in that space that goes down between, if you don't have rebar or something like that, I just like look around like in areas, and especially areas next to a creek, you know, because there's so many like just rocks and goofy things around there. Plus you probably had to dig out in order to, you know, I say you go down a couple inches, dig out to level out the ground. Make sure there's some like rocks and stones and stuff at that point where this one meets the next one. So in other words, it gives it strength, push strength, you know, so it's just not the mortar alone holding up the wall. All right. Inside, you know, the hollow part of the cinder block, you've got that filled with stuff. I mean, if you want to be crazy, you could, you know, put mortar in there and then fill it with concrete, and then it's like, it's a solid wall. But I'm just saying cheap wall that will last, you know, 20 years or whatever, as long as that guy would have owned a building. And so just do that. You could do it in an afternoon, get some music, get some beers, have some fun in the sun. The next time the river or the stream comes up a foot to overflow, it hits against the cinder block wall, you know, and that's that. And if you want to, you get a can of cold tar, cheap tar or something like that, and on the side facing the stream, at the seams where you've concreted them together, you could just slap on like some tar, so it's like it gives it that waterproof thing. These are just little secrets I've learned along the way, either from guys who did things, or just because, just common sense stuff. It's like when I'm doing electrical wiring and stuff, I'll use those little wire, the wire connectors to connect a wire, things you screw on the thing. But I'll always add some electrical tape over top of it just in case, especially when it's something I'm embedding into like a wall, or I'm doing something, just as an added thing, so that, in case something would, it can't pull out, an added feature, things you learn by experience or just safety ideas. And then some electricians say, there's no need to do that. That thing's not going to come apart. It's like, I don't care. I feel safer. I put some electric tape on it. So, anyway, the guy just like looked at me, stared at me with like a blank stare. And every year, like I said, I'm long gone from that place. I think and plus I think the thing's sold now. Well, actually the guy lost it because he was so irresponsible. It went up for like share for sale or tax sale or something like that. But, so he would have to pay to clean out that, the people who lived in the basement apartment, deal with all the mold and all the stuff in the basement, maybe get a destroyed washer or dryer, and all this kind of stuff repeatedly, once or twice a year. And all he had to do is spend a couple $100 and build a little retaining wall, towards the edge. Because it wasn't like it's a raging flood, I started talking about the Mississippi. This isn't like you're holding back the Mississippi, you're talking about a creek that when you get these torrential downpours, that it overflows the banks, and that water has no place to go. So it goes to the, fills the yard, and, water is like water. If there's, indentations or something below level, the water's going to want to go down it. So it's just like, no, we're just building a basic rudimentary retaining wall. That's why I'm saying I would just throw a couple of rocks in there just to make sure the wall had a little strength to it, that it couldn't be pushed over easily. But certainly there was no, it wasn't like the water pressure was the mighty Mississippi. And so common sense, and that's what's lacking. And that's why the United States, this gets back to what I always talk about, Western civilization, the fall of Western civilization, and the collapse of the United States of America. And when I forget about 2024 and guilty and all that stuff, is because young people aren't learning these trades, and older people, aren't sharing. Hi, Kat. And yeah, I know. You want your picture on? So, so if you have a situation where, there's a lot of people talk about infrastructure right now, but like I say, you need carbon-based fuels and fossil fuels to run the heavy equipment to maintain the infrastructure, repair it, and build things. So, that's a whole other idea. They're basically ushering in and actually pushing forth, the downfall of Western civilization and the destruction of the United States infrastructure. And without infrastructure, you're done. With our grid hasn't been maintained, our sewers haven't been maintained, our water lines, underground water lines haven't been maintained. There's a lot 100-year-old gas lines underground and things like that. And so, that's, and people don't know how to do stuff. And a guy like me giving you little tips like that, there's nobody doing this, and no young people, they're not teaching trades, widespread. Like I tell people all the time, you are better off. You are better off not going to college and just learning a trade, because you'll make more money, assuming we survive, that you'll make more money knowing how to build a retaining wall or how to fix a thing, right? Or maintain things, than you will having some degree in some oddball, whatever that has no effect on actual life and civilization and society. And that's the reason why we've got so many people out there protesting, which I'm totally against all that kind of stuff. It's an exercise in futility, because why don't you do something concrete? Do something real. We need this, we need that, or this person, cult of personality, this orange man bad, this guy bad, whatever, all these things. And it's like, what are you talking about, right? Do something about it. These people aren't in charge of your life. You're in charge of your own life. That guy could have fixed, could have solved the problem, saved himself thousands and thousands of dollars, and might still own that building, right? Instead of it being, having a moldy basement and no one wanting to live in there and blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, just figure that out. But, America, the rich history of America. So this is the beginning of Route 66 in Chicago. All right. You see that? Like I say, I'm getting glare. I don't know where the glare is coming from, actually. But that's the start of Route 66. And what Route 66 is a road that goes from Chicago all the way down, through, like, I guess it would be Chicago, Indiana, Missouri, through Kansas, Oklahoma, and then straight west, and of course there's other roads there now. I think there's a 10, 40 or something like that. I mean, I've taken the road many times. I've been to Chicago. I've been in the Chicago Tower, but I never started to go on Route 66 from Chicago. But along Route 66 is like really cool. And, and a lot of this stuff has changed, but when I went, and I haven't been on Route 66 in about 25 years, there used to be some classic things. Like, I remember the last time I went there, I passed what was the Cadillac Ranch. There used to be this guy, and he would buy a new Cadillac, I don't know, not every year or every so often. And he would, instead of selling it or trading it in, he would like embed his Cadillac in the ground. And there were these Cadillacs, along Route 66 or along the highway. And there were a series of Cadillacs, all in a row. And what was really sad to see the last time I did this, and this, like I say, this was like 25 years ago, is that those Cadillacs were all covered with like graffiti and stuff like that, and I'm thinking, like, this was a landmark. And it just, and that was the beginning of me realizing, going like, man, people just nothing is sacred to anybody. They just had no appreciation for like what's come by. But, you had these, like, these classic gas stations. Look at those old gas pumps. Look at that old truck in the background. These were postcards I'd bought actually on that last trip about 25 years ago. I was just looking through some stuff, and I just found these things. People remember that old symbol. What gas station is that from? Leave that in the comments section. Look at this place. The detail and, the pride that the people had with these businesses. In a lot of these places, like this Native American, motif type of stuff. But I found when I went into a lot of places there that, many of them had Native Americans, either owned or working there and whatever. People like, that's another thing. These people who stand up like for a certain people, or like, or the BLM thing. And it's like, they think that they're not representing, they think they're not representing the people, because when you ask the people themselves, they're like, we don't care. I've talked, I've met many in Native, because I've traveled all over the place. And so I've met a lot of many, Native Americans. And I would just say the word Indians, because that's how the guys I knew, they used to refer to themselves as Indians. That's the other thing. And there's these people going, oh, we can't call them the Cleveland Indians, or we can't call that team such and such. And it's like, you talk to an Indian or a Native American guy, and he's like, what do you think of this? And he's like, I don't know. I think it's cool. Right. That they give, tribute. Look at this place. You could buy rattlesnakes. Rattlesnakes here. Tony Caravan morning show and tell. Real primitive too. I'm not even sure what this. Oh, this is a view inside a cafe. You see how you see the glass there, the painted on the glass, and then there's a table. And the thing about this is, when you're traveling on the real route now, there are some parts where you can still see Route 66 off to the right, and so you could veer off and be on Route 66, which is there. It's the parts that have remained. It was like a ghost town, and it's the classic thing. Once they finish this highway, these old cafes and these gas stations and these novelty shops. Well, that very day, Route 66 was basically rendered useless. What are you going to do? Drive on a Route 66, an old road that wasn't maintained well, speed limit maybe 50 miles an hour or something like that, and you've got an interstate where you could drive 75 miles an hour straight on, brand new highway. And so I drove off a couple of times, veered off. I've drove across the country a couple of times by myself, and looked at some of these places. And I remember one place struck me, and of course it's the day before the iPhone, so you didn't have that phone with you all the time, take pictures of things. But I looked through the window at this one restaurant, cafe, or whatever, and it was like that story I was telling about that building that I took over and had to fix up and clean up. Like, the tables were still set. You could look in and it was dust, but it's like the people just kind of like up and left. It's over. They probably took a couple of key things and personal items, but they weren't about to take the ketchup, the salt and pepper shakers and the ketchup containers and the placemats and some of that stuff. So you looked in and it was like looking at this, time capsule, of a cafe that, it's like out of the Twilight Zone, that once was, once would have been filled with people, traveling along the road. And here are the tables just dusty with these remnants of placemats and napkins and salt and pepper shakers. And here's a counter with the old, spindly type of seats and stuff like that. It's like, just, I don't know, sad, interesting, whatever. And, that's what this postcard brings back, that kind of memory, though this is a little bit, a little more pristine than what I'm talking about. And this gets back to the American Indian type idea. Here's this, TP curios. And I remember, I don't know if I went in this place exactly. In fact, I may have been where I bought this selection of cards or something. But they were Indians, selling their things. And and I bought some of those things. Look at this. I love old signs, no matter where they are, whether it was old Route 66 or things you find, Sometimes when they're demolishing a building, you find, some sign from the past that was buried over. And then, they used to always paint on the old barns. I think these caverns things probably still there. But you'd see a lot of things about old chewing tobacco or stuff that were painted on old barns. Speaking of the classic cars, look at those buildings. You stayed in those little places. And getting back to the stick buildings, you see how those things are like brick and rounded? The idea is that, and people have known this for a very long time. Well, here's the last one, then I'll get into that. It's like Will Rogers Motor Court. All that neon, And there was nothing better than at like night, you staying in a motel like that and just going outside. I was, you're a cigarette smoker. Just going out, leaning on the back of your car, and there's this neon light and this weird glow and stars, stars as far as you can see. That's another thing. People don't have no idea of stars. When you're out there on the road, it's just like they don't know what stars are. And you're smoking a cigarette with this neon glow. You may, with some girl or something, and it's just magical, And just to show people that I was this is me. This is one of my websites. I had this like great solar stuff. I still have it, but I'm going to, I think, let it go if I haven't already. But I was into like selling solar and wind, we're talking about 20 years ago, and these were some of my promotional, pieces. And I just accidentally found, happened upon this too. And this is like a lot of my suppliers and stuff. And like here was, like, look, these are things. This is me being a graphic designer, but like, this was a thing, me showing renewable technology 20 some years ago and telling people how it works and what you can do. And I had a lot of this stuff, like, this thing here, this thing lasted me about 10 years. It was like inside there was a battery, but you could there were plugs on there. And you see these things now, they have more modernized versions of them. But, you could charge this from a solar panel or just charge it in your house. But this thing was always ready. And if the power went down, you just literally plugged into it. And it even had a built-in radio and stuff like that. But it would last you, if you weren't using a lot of high wattage type of thing. So like I could probably run this computer and my internet modem. And I think I told a story in one of my earlier videos where I was able to hook my direct TV set up to it, a fan, because it was the summertime when the power went out for like almost a full 24 hours. And I was able to watch TV to see what the weather, what was going on. I had a fan on me. And at nighttime, I was able to carry it into my bathroom, so I could have light in there to brush my teeth and do whatever you got to do before you go, and plug a lamp in my bedroom before I went to sleep, So I've always been into that. So when I talk about, that's the kind of stuff I wish these Gretas and these other people would talk about, the Al Gores or the Mr. Botox facelift Kerry, taking a private jet to these conferences. They don't really talk about practical, common sense, real things. I was doing that 20 years ago. It's like, yeah, get a solar panel. If you have a house or something, or a garage, put a solar panel in your garage and, the power stuff there, save some electricity. Get yourself one of those power, box things, so when there's a power outage or something, you've got electric and you can charge your various devices and stuff like that. If you have bigger space, get more solar panels, or whatever. That's all fine and dandy, but don't make this like life or death thing. Like, oh, it's the end of the world because of, we're a carbon-based society. We are a carbon-based society, and we will continue to be a carbon-based society. And so to finish off, I just want with that title card, the stick building there. and getting back to Tornado Alley and hurricanes and all these other things, which ties into this common sense practicality thing that these people, if they really cared, they would be talking about. It's the same with this disease that's going on now. If they really cared about it, instead of holding some kind of ridiculous mock trial that the result of it has no real effect on anything, or that they could have done 30 days from now, right? There was there's no timing, for it. Is that why? Why? If you really are serious about something, why aren't you doing it now? Why aren't you sending people those $1,400 you promised them? Why aren't you sending out that stuff to these frontline workers and all that stuff? It seems to me common sense that you don't really care and you're not taking it serious, and you're playing some kind of political head game on people, and makes me wonder about what I should believe or shouldn't believe. It's kind of crazy. And so it goes back to this idea of these people and more the contractors and the governments than the common man, because the common man is busy. It's like, I've got things to do. When I had a job, you get up in the morning, you get ready for work, you go to work, you work all day, and, you're tired. When you have some time off, you got to do your laundry, you got to do your shopping. People who have kids, they got to take care of that, go to do this, do that. It's like, they're lucky if maybe on a Saturday night they could go out, or they could see a movie, or they could do something. So it's not the average person's fault, most of the time. It's these politicians and the media people that are just lying to them and presenting this false reality about things. And so, the type of I say, stop the protests, stop all this nonsense, stop the lies on the media, stop all this crazy political pop culture nonsense, and forget about the cult of personality. Don't go building stick homes in Tornado Alley or along the Gulf Coast or along Florida. The Atlantic, Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, these places that are constantly hit by these storms. And if they're not hurricanes, they're tropical storms, hello. Yeah. You don't have to say testing, man. If you see it, I see it. So the idea is, don't do that. This idea of the dome home, people have known about for years. You could go back to, even the 50s, and the geodesic dome, and, they had them at Epcot Center. I think they built a big geodesic dome there. But the idea is that, and when you have like strong winds, straight running winds, coming at you, or hurricane, tornado type things, when it hits a flat surface, okay, well, when 400 miles per hour, okay, it's going to knock that surface down. All right, it's going to blow it over. And, of course, there's other factors. We're not going to get into the whole physics of this because I'm just about ready to end this thing. But, or the roof, if you don't have your place constructed right, the roof's going to fly off, due to, multiple factors having to do with pressure, air pressure, and the manner in which, how those straight line winds or that storm, tornado activity, the vortexes or whatever hits you. And so the idea is, these areas, and there's nothing foolproof, there's no foolproof construction. But I've seen things down in like New Orleans and other areas along the Gulf Coast where people have actually rebuilt their houses, and they've had rounded, that not necessarily a dome home. A dome home is the best. A properly built dome home, right, Which, what's the big deal? Do you really need this aluminum sided rectangle, right? It's like with trailer parks and stuff like that. It's just as easy for them to build a series of domes in a park, and it's still, it's actually would be more inexpensive, because a dome home could be literally poured concrete in a shape, but you're still going to have the same amount of square footage inside, right? And after all, it's a place to live. It's like you got to sit there, and actually some of them are kind of cool looking. But I've seen people that haven't gone the whole dome route, but instead have rounded their porches and their corners of the buildings facing, say, the Gulf. And when these storms have come in, all the houses around them who built these stick buildings, rectangular traditional structures, right, are all leveled to the ground. And this guy's house is standing. It's the same as like no areas where you've known to flood. These people have basically rebuilt, but pyloned up, so many feet. So knowing that storm surge is going to come in and that house is there, the water's running under, the storm surge. But these other people are just building, and they're just building these wooden stick homes. It's like a toothpick home. Of course the storm's going to knock it down. All right. And like I say, there's no, I'm not a total engineer. I minored in architecture in school. But I mean, a lot of this is common sense, but a lot of it is proven, in case studies. And so, you got to, so these are the realistic things that I'd like to hear come out of the mouth of these people who seem so concerned about, climate, and everything. It's like, rebuild properly, build retaining walls, think in terms of pylons, raising your house up a few feet, okay, for this to cover. So if the storm surge comes in, you are fine. It's no big deal. People, in my neighborhood, my porch is actually raised up, believe it or not. Just the way they built it, and we don't, for no reason other than, the guy, my porch, some people's, their door's right on the ground, but this guy built a porch. Whoever built this house, this is a 100-some-year-old house, but it's raised. I have a raised porch. So it's not like it's architecturally, aesthetically, ugly or anything of that kind. So, that's, use your common sense. And so whenever I see a stick house being built in the 21st century, and especially in these areas that are prone to storms, it just disturbs me. And whenever I see an area that gets storm surge and I don't see houses raised, or whenever there's a place, like I told you the earlier story about the creek, that someone doesn't build a retaining wall to hold back a creek or something like that, or somebody that just is obsessed with building along the Mississippi that periodically floods and then cries on TV that this is the third time they've lost everything. That really disturbs me. And that's where these so-called, that's the practicality of climate, of where we should be. If we want to fix our infrastructure, it's about people, it's about living, and it's about common sense. And if you're a younger person, learn a trade. That's what it's all about. Learn a trade. So, I want to thank everybody for watching now, and people who are going to be watching it, watch this when it's posted after I sign off, and think about those kind of things. Common sense. You really know deep inside. Don't listen to people. Don't listen to memes. Don't listen to any of that nonsense. You've got the answers in your head, or you could find the right answers out there. So just do them. Live well. That's the most important thing. Take care. Talk to you soon.